It is good morning. It is Thursday, the 1st of August, 2024, and this is a special board meeting of the Waterville Valley Select Board. I am Rich Reader, the chair, and here today as well as Vice Chair Bob Freeze and Select Board Member Wendy Rathgeber. So we have a quorum. We have one item on the agenda, the land donation discussion. I just want to say a few words before that on another topic. And here today as well as Vice Chair Bob Freeze and Select Board Member Wendy Rathgeber, a regular.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we have a
Well,
quorum.
it's when it airs, they're all set.
We're good? All right, thank you. There's been, I think all of us have seen on social media, a lot of commentary on dumpster doors and ordinance and such. I would just like to point out for the record that what the select board has been doing, it's held, I think, 2 meetings so far. We'll have a third meeting at our regular, a third time discussion at our regular select board meeting next Wednesday, the 7th at 3 p.m. And the purpose of this discussion is to update and revise the current municipal solid waste regulations. There is no discussion of changing ordinances, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to get that out there for the record. And if you're interested in that topic, it will be an agenda item next Wednesday at our regular meeting
3 p.m.
at 3 p.m. One of the, I'm sure, many agenda items we will have to include revaluation, which people may be interested in.
Sure.
Property revaluation. I think we'll have the report by then.
Just for clarification, the municipal solid waste regulations don't have anything to do with doors on the front of dumpsters.
Not directly, no. I mean, the ordinance does not require doors on dumpsters. The ordinance requires that the dumpster in an enclosure be screened from public view from a town maintained way. Doors are the way that most properties choose to screen the dumpster in the enclosure. But the regulations deal with not just that small portion of municipal solid waste, but the whole gamut from the transfer station to what's allowed and not allowed, et cetera, right?
This proposal does not request any changes. It's just stating what exists.
And updating it.
And updating
making sure we're consistent, because it's been a while since we've updated the solid waste, municipal solid waste regulations, but in the meantime, we've changed the ordinances, the 20 and 21 that deal with these issues several times. So we want to make sure we're consistent, and there's a formatting issue and whatnot. So we had a public hearing, I think at our last meeting, and we will have a regular meeting again about this next week, and we will then have another public hearing to discuss it before we make any changes to the regulations. But
Yeah,
we
so
cannot,
probably the end of the month.
the end of the meeting
Before you're voting on it.
yeah, the 24th of May, August. But the select board does not have the power to change unilaterally an ordinance. That's a town meeting function. Okay, so let us move to the issue at hand. The land donation from David Britton to the town. I think it would be helpful. Couple things. First, this is we've had a series of meetings about this, and this is just another meeting where there will be more to discuss this issue. But I think it would be helpful just to start off with context, like where are we today?
Yeah. So the town, after town meeting where it was voted down to appropriate the money to purchase the land,
Right.
it was not, we didn't deal with
Pursue
it
it.
for several months. We didn't pursue it any further.
No.
Then David came to the board and asked about donating the land to the town. When he did that, there was a discussion about it, and the board decided to have start an environmental review process on the parcel of land before making any decisions whether or not to accept it. and we completed what is called a phase 1 environmental site assessment on the parcel. You then had the engineer who conducted this. This was done by Monadnock Environmental Consultants. Mark Henderson, who
Mhm.
used to be a
Mhm.
resident here in town, is very familiar with the community, but he came in and reviewed the phase 1 assessment with you. There was a recommendation to go on to a phase 2 environmental assessment. The board, that's a very involved process. I think I don't remember the exact estimate that he gave us, but it was several tens of thousands of dollars to
It's
do
like
the
30 to
phase 2.
40,000,
30 to
I think.
40, I think, was the number.
That was just for
So,
the
phase 2.
phase 2,
Yeah.
not for any.
That was the,
That-
that was
that-
the engineering portion of
The
it.
engineering portion of phase 2.
Right.
So there is an interim step that is allowed under the process before you move to a full phase 2, called a preliminary environmental soil assessment,
Mhm.
which is much less expensive. And the reason that the cost is an issue is because we didn't appropriate any money to work on this. So we're basically taking it out of our operating budget to do this work. So the board decided to have Monadnock conduct this preliminary environmental soil assessment, which they did, and they reported back. And we had another meeting with Mark to review the results of that assessment. And these documents you're welcome to, we'll make copies of them for you or whatever. They are public. As a result of that preliminary soil assessment, he confirmed that moving to a full phase 2 assessment would be required for a full environmental review of the property. They identified, they dug test pits as part of the preliminary assessment. And they found various things at various depths within the parcel. I think they dug 16 holes
Mhm.
with the backhoe. So they provided that information to us. Then the board had a discussion with David Britton, reviewed some desires that he has for the property moving forward, and shared with him and discussed with him the phase 1 and the preliminary assessment.
And I think the board at that point made the decision that before deciding on phase 2 with certainty, that we wanted to get a legal opinion from an environmental law firm.
Yeah.
And that is in process.
That is in process.
So we're still waiting for that.
Yeah.
Before we decide our next steps with regard to the environmental review. So that's that part of it. And then the
Correct.
other part of it is David Britton's conditions, if I can put, or hopes as he called them.
Yeah.
But these are the conditions he'd like to place on any agreement for the land.
Yeah, because
Donation.
you guys haven't had a very detailed discussion of the things that he said during the July 3rd meeting.
We've not.
And
Right.
how we want to respond to
Right.
these. David came in last week and saw me and just asked for an update. So I asked Rich to get the
To
board
lay on this
together
special
outside of
meeting.
our regular meetings have
Right.
been very long lately, so.
So we're waiting on the legal opinion on one side before
Yep.
moving forward on the environment review, and we want to get a better picture of the
Correct.
hopes, conditions that
Yeah.
David would like to attach to
Mhm.
this donation.
Right.
And that's where we are today. So this is, and as I said, a meeting and a series of meetings we will continue to have on this. Although I think an added factor to this is David does want this to happen as quickly as
soon as we can.
soon as we can, but it's an involved process. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, Wendy, there's something you wanted to say?
No, I just thought it was important to point out that once we hit the level 2, anything that is found, and correct me if
Right.
I'm incorrect,
Mhm.
that is potentially hazardous might be too strong of a word.
It needs
but
to be remediated.
Yes, it needs to be reported to the state.
Yeah.
And then we are under their direction as to how to solve it, or we cede control of.
And the board,
process.
the board can correct me if I'm wrong, but I came away from the two discussions with Mark. That regardless of if anything happens on the property, the town
Well-
will have some.
And that's why that legal opinion is so
Yes,
critical to
That's
our
right,
decision.
and that's what we're checking. with
Really,
the
do we
legal.
want to spend the money
Correct.
to determine at 30, 40 is just the upfront money? There'll be more
Yeah,
money to determine whether or not we want to move forward with the donation, if the town is going to be liable for it anyway.
The town is listed on state records in the early seventies. The town is listed as the operator of
not the owner, but.
a
the
municipal dump, if you
Mhm.
will,
owner.
in Waterville Valley. And so I think the position that the select board is leaning toward is, and that David is leaning toward, is if the town acquired the property, not to disturb the surface. It's been like that for 50 years. And without incident, we got water wells in the vicinity that have been tested over the years without any incident. Once you get into an level 2 environmental assessment, we're talking loads of money
Mhm.
potentially, and
And having it under our control, if we have the liability, in any event, having it under control
That's right.
allows us to deal with any development,
that's right.
As the owner.
If David sold,
non-development.
if David
right?
sold the land to someone else, if we didn't want it as the town, and he sold it to somebody else, then the town has no control over what happens. It's in a recreation zone, somebody else could do something with it, they could start disturbing the ground. And the town is, in my opinion anyway, the town's gonna end up being liable, so I think that the town is better served by owning the property and controlling it with conservation easements than letting somebody else own it.
And we do have test wells there currently because of the water wells that had been in the past, so we can keep testing to make sure that there has been no
Right.
changes. If,
Right.
we get another Irene type incident, or even just as on a regular basis, we can always test to make sure nothing has shifted or changed.
And I think
Yeah.
too that we'll have to see what the law for. To me, that's sort of the hinge
Yes.
point of
Yes,
everything.
absolutely.
Liability may not be the correct word. I think it may be town's exposure to remediation forced on it by the state if someone else were to own the property and try to develop
Start
it.
digging it up.
Yeah.
Start digging up. And that's I think our main concern. So
And so, number one step, get the legal opinion. Number two step,
mhm.
before the board can move forward to accept this gift. By statute, we have to hold 2 public hearings. And we'll disclose all of this information and answer questions and take comments during those 2 public hearing periods. But we're not at a point right now where the board so far has been comfortable even putting up that first public hearing because we don't have all of the information yet, and we're still in the process. The intent of this meeting was to simply go over David's things.
Hopes.
And
Yeah.
make sure that there wasn't anything that the board wanted me to communicate back to him.
We have already generally, stated to David, I think at our last meeting with him, that the fewer conditions, the better, because it's our intent, were we to acquire the land, to leave it undisturbed and just used as it is used today. But that other boards and other town meetings, of course, since it's town property, would have the option, the ability to do whatever they wanted with the land because it is town-owned
Mhm.
property. So his conditions are important for us.
Right.
Make sure there's nothing there that we can't live with to accept it. I see some hands, so
I I'm looking at an online report at DES in their one stop that talks about old landfill open dump site, old dump.
That's
And
us.
on
That's
that,
us.
Yeah.
it says it is owned by the Waterville Company and it is the responsible party is the Waterville Company. It doesn't say the town.
Well, there's another stop there
There's another.
yeah, that has Town of Waterville Valley on it.
That was the
And
phase
That's
one.
down at the other end of the property.
Well, the thing is, they don't treat it as one end or the other. They
Okay,
treat it as a property.
okay. At
And
the
so-
end, that there were some results on that
Mhm.
we're doing further testing.
Mhm.
That's the one that's down near West Branch Road.
That's where the majority of
The majority of the material was found.
material was. There is some
Yeah.
at the other end, but that the phase one study was to bring all those documents together. That was one among others that led the environmental firm to conclude that in its opinion, the town may have some exposure here. And that's when we decided, well, we need to look at it from a legal standpoint before we move forward.
Because the laws were, as you know, significantly different
Different.
in the seventies than they
Pre
are.
1982
And
or
it's-
something like
so
that.
I think the
Yeah.
cutoff is 82, 83,
Something like
somewhere in
that.
that
Yeah.
time frame. So what we are liable for is a question that we're gonna need council to tell us what the exposure is. And how that is potentially shared with the Waterville Company, with David, or, you know, whomever. We just don't know at this point.
But if the town has some liability on this property, it has that liability right now.
That's
Yes.
correct, and that's what Bob,
Exactly.
that's, I think, what Bob was saying.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
I should state that I was the president of Waterville Company when this land was sold to David Britton. So on any vote on this issue, I'm gonna sit on that side of the room,
Yeah.
not up here.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna be voting on the issue.
Right. Bob has recused himself when it came to any decisions on this in previous meeting. Yes, hi Gretchen.
Hi, you mentioned you had some data that we could get copies of.
Yeah.
And I wondered, could you put that or make that available online? So could it be?
Sure,
attached
yeah,
to-
we'll put it on the website.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the phase one study, which is really a document search. And then there's the soil sampling,
Soil analysis.
soil analysis, soil analysis.
assessment.
So that's where we're at this point. We have not moved to a phase two environmental review of the property.
Correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that the town has exposure no matter what we do.
That's our working assumption.
That's our
But
assumption.
we're waiting
right
for a
now.
legal opinion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Legal opinion
Yeah.
on that, so do nothing, we're liable, purchase it, except the gift, we're liable.
And I think it was Bob
Yeah.
that just said, if it is under the town's control, then making sure that it's not used beyond what it's currently used for. Make sure that nothing is built on it and that sort of thing, where there's disturbance of the soil. That is an advantage to us, and I think that's why the board has
Right.
continued to look at this and not just said no outright.
Right, but whoever, let's just say we say no,
Yeah.
and somebody else purchases it.
Mhm.
They're dealing with the same thing that we're talking about right now, that,
Correct.
yeah, the hazardous material.
Right.
is gonna be
And-
some, but it sounds like it's
Right.
still our problem.
It may well be,
It may well
and
be.
that's what that's the hinge
Right.
we're looking at right now.
If we control it, it's in our destiny, rather
Right.
than let somebody else take it over and do whatever with it.
Right, and I would make 2 points here. One is the soil assessment. I don't think it's, and I know we're struggling because we're not experts in the area. But it did not find what may be commonly thought of as hazardous
Right.
material. You know, this was not an industrial site. It was a dump, and there were things probably in there that's decomposed. So there's trash is what, for the most part.
Household waste.
Normal
For the most
municipal
part.
solid waste. is
That's what we're-
And demolition debris.
From is
Those are the two
two
things.
major
they found.
things. So it's not like it was used to, but of course, there's hazardous materials in that, from, you know, the past that were considered, but that's what it is. It's mostly household trash and demolition debris. And the second thing is, when we talked about this, we do have options if we own the property with regard to how we treat it. We don't necessarily have to mitigate anything. It could just be left as is, but then that's going to be a state decision if the state were to decide to do something, or wanted to do something. So, but we would be in that position anyway if somebody else owned it,
Right.
did some digging. This is our working assumption, right? Found the stuff, came to the town and says, you have to mitigate this, so I can, on this rec land, build my whatever, my field house.
I have to add a comment here because I had this property under agreement in, I think, approximately 2018. Bob
Mhm.
was represented and sold us the property, or we put it under agreement. We were able to back out of the agreement because Waterville Company did not disclose that there was a landfill on the property when there was. One of the reasons I became concerned, a former selectman from this town described it as the carpet dump. And you did admit there's demolition material in there. It was a common site for developers coming in and demoing a condo. They threw shingles, tile, carpet in there. So it is hazardous. In the spirit of transparency, we should not overlook the people who came forward at town meeting in the oil and gas business or gas station business that informed us, who we are all not experts in. Deed holder number one is first in line to pay for any potential cleanup. If we accept that from the town, the gift from the town, we are getting Dave Britton out of line to pay for the cleanup. That was almost me, and I would like to save the town thousands of money in legal cost, because our attorney advised us not to take on this property for that reason, because if you're deed holder number one, you're number one to pay. Number two will be the one who caused the pollution, which would probably be Waterville Company. Number three might be the town because they controlled it. But there was conflicting information, 17, 18, whenever that was, as to whether or not the town actually took ownership. So the legal opinion is critically important. The spirit of this conversation is leading towards lobbying for accepting the property. So I just want to add that to the record, and for the folks on YouTube who can't be here, that's a really important consideration. Ultimately, I don't want to be the party pooper here. I love the land. I use it all the time. I want it undisturbed or cleaned up. If we have to clean it up, we really should know what that cleanup cost is before we accept the donation, not just the level 1 soil testing, the level 2 soil testing and potential cleanup cost. And additionally, I'm also concerned that the town moved forward with operation budget money to accept the land when the town voted this down for purchase. Why is the current landowner not paying the town for this level 1 soil testing?
Yeah.
Why are we paying for this? I think the spirit of the town was clear at town meeting. We didn't want it.
Yeah, how come the Britons aren't
Paying
paying?
for it. This is costing us a
So,
significant amount of funds.
Sitting
Legal opinion.
sitting here, I would make 2 points. Cleanup. Preliminarily, the cleanup may just involve putting a cap on it. It doesn't mean digging everything out, okay? And that could be expensive. So again, we have to be careful with some of the terms we're throwing around here. We're waiting for a legal opinion to understand what legal exposure the town may have before we move forward. The reason that we are paying for it is because we, the board, decided we are interested in acquiring this property for the reasons that we've stated here, that it would be under our control. Whatever's there remains undisturbed, pending the result of a legal determination. Since we decided we wanted to move forward with it, then it seemed to me, I think in the rest of the, at least Wendy and I, since we're the ones making the decisions here, that it's our cost. If we didn't want to move forward with it, then we would just back off and say, no, thank you. So we did not impose on the donation that, okay, we'll accept it, but you have to.
Well, Mr. Britton wants to get rid of the land. We've spoken to him about it, and I
Yes.
understand why he doesn't want to give his son that liability. So why he
Mhm.
could afford to pay that cost, why are we paying for it?
Because we decided to pay for it ourselves because we want to acquire the land. And that's a decision we made. I mean, to be blunt about it, I mean, obviously you don't agree with it.
I understand, but I just feel like the board is deaf to what the town wants.
Well, please, go
because
ahead.
I was at that meeting as well, and a lot of the argument counter the town purchasing was that it was at a higher purchase price than what the Britons acquired it for. And from my witnessing, I wasn't on the board at the time, I was just there in the crowd. And what I heard was, yes, the concern about the environmental aspect, but also the cost aspect. That I think weighed as heavily on
Yeah.
people's minds as anything else.
Yeah, and I would just mention, it is incorrect to say that the majority of the town did not want to purchase this property.
Hmm.
The fact is that it required a 60% majority.
True.
And the majority of the town did vote to acquire the property, but it fell 2 votes short of the 60%.
And it required 60% because we wanted to bond the money. And there's no way for us to understand to what extent concerns over the waste in the property or concern over the cost really played in the decision. The majority of people at town meeting voted for acquiring the property, but it was 2 votes short of the 60% required to bond it. So this is why I think the board decided that a donation, again, we had no contact with Mr. Burton when he came for a donation, that it seemed to us that it made sense to continue this process. But now we're moving in a way to determine what the legal liability of the town may be before we acquire the property.
And if I could add, we, again, with tossing around terms and none of us being experts, we talked about, well, we would just have to cap it. Just capping means cutting down every single tree, preventing any tree from ever growing there and trucking in 3-4 additional feet
If it came to that.
It
to cover
varies
the entire
across town.
area.
Right.
It is a huge expense, would greatly change the character of the land. And, as someone else who enjoys the trails there, it would be hugely impactful. So just, again,
Yeah.
tossing around terms, we need to
Yeah,
understand what we're talking
and the
about.
questions to council are, not only what is our exposure, but also what are our options?
Mhm.
Can we just leave it the way it is right now?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to change, that the board has not wanted to change the character of the land.
Right.
We, like Bob said, we just want to leave it the way it is because it's being used for the light recreational uses that it has been. If we can.
If I recall correctly, our environmental consultant said that towns in our region,
Mhm.
pre 1982 or
82, yeah,
83,
whatever.
town dumps, often what they do is they do nothing.
Right.
They just let it be because it was household trash.
Mhm.
And the state hasn't moved on those properties in the main. Sometimes they do, but the common thing is for a town just to leave it alone unless
And
forced
of
to do
course,
something by the
At the
state.
time the trash was put there, it was covered over, so.
It was covered over, it was burned, it
There are
was
a number of different
a number
methods.
of different things that were
Yeah,
done.
so we're still in the information acquiring process, but we do affirmatively want to acquire the land to make your point. Sorry, hand?
I would just like to add one other comment with the
Yeah.
record, having been someone who considered paying a lot of money for this land. People don't understand, no one's lining up to buy this property, that's why it's being donated. It has liability, it doesn't have a lot of commercial value, it doesn't have a lot of residential value. People may or may not understand, it's zone recreation. You could put a building there, but to keep it zone recreation, there's not much more you can do. There's been, I think, some misinformation out there about goat farms and this and that. There's not a lot you can do with this property, so I just want the voters to be aware that, you know, the fear of someone else purchasing this property and opening it up, pretty unrealistic. Especially where it's in a floodplain and the insurance is so astronomically expensive. It's not a viable commercial property.
I just think we need to be careful to describing the reasons as to why this individual wants to donate the property.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily true that he wants to donate it because, you know, it doesn't have any value or that kind of thing, or he's concerned about liability. There are a lot of other reasons that could play into this, and only he can say what they are.
True.
I saw another, yes,
How
sir.
many acres, were dumped versus not dumped?
They have not defined the actual limits. That was not part of the phase one or the preliminary. But
Is there an
there,
estimate?
it's the majority. I think Mark said it's the majority of the parcel. It's not.
Yeah, it was denser in some
It was
areas, but
denser in some areas, the material that they found, but the test pits that we did were across the entire parcel.
And as for what can go on in recreation, I will just,
Yeah.
and this is, I think, what also something we are aware of. So use in recreation zone. Playing fields, parks, playgrounds, trails for non-motorized recreation, including downhill ski trails, alpine ski lift tram, or other aerial transportation, golf courses, golf clubhouses and pro shop, gazebos, skating rinks and tennis courts, indoor, outdoor, swimming pools and water features, rec centers, sport facilities, sport institutes, camps for recreational inspection, special recreational entertainment events, skill venues and courses, health and wellness facilities, use of animals for recreational purposes up to 8 weeks. It can
It's
be,
pretty expensive.
it's
yeah.
pretty expansive list that we have to keep in mind too. Yes.
I'm kind of hearing conflicting information. The board is giving me the impression, okay, it's hazardous, we're gonna leave it as is. And just leave it as is. But you're suggesting it is hazardous and this is a real problem and needs to be mitigated and something needs to be done. They're two conflicting feelings.
Mhm. There are, and I
That's-
think
that's
it's
accurate.
better, yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
basing my opinion
Yeah.
on the legal advice I paid for from an environmental attorney.
And I think the job of this board is to decide what would be the best benefit to the town, both in cost and usage.
Whether it's hazardous or not.
Um,
The definition of this hazardous.
That's where an attorney will be very helpful in defining that, because, and I think it's very helpful too, that we do have the ability to keep testing. And we could get some expertise on that as well to find out how frequent that should be tested, just to make sure there's no effluent. You know, that type of thing.
Right. Since these costs are mounting, is there some way you could go to the David Britton and say, look, if you want us, now he's giving it to us, so I guess you have no leverage. You can't ask him to pay for it.
Well, we could, but it's not a condition that we've imposed at this time.
Well,
But
he's giving it to you, so why would he pay for anything? Unless he really wants to.
right, and he does, and the purpose of this meeting, and again, we're gonna have a number of meetings on this, include at least 2 public hearings as required by law before a decision is made. And so what we wanted to understand today was what conditions does Mr. Britton have for donating the land? As I mentioned, our condition is that the conditions be as minimal as possible at this point.
Has Mr. Britton articulated what his conditions are, ultimately bottom line?
Well, he's got a working list that he's given us, and that's what we're gonna go through here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just. So far, with all the testing that has been done. There is nothing hazardous that requires reports to DES.
That is
Correct.
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 And that's what the environmental,
Including groundwater surveying and everything.
Right.
So, yes.
just something else you wanted to say, Lynn?
No.
Okay, so let us move on to Mr. Britton's hopes.
So his hopes are a cleanup of I'm looking at the last paragraph, which was his list that I think he discussed with the
Mhm.
board when he came in on the 3rd. Cleanup of the area below West Branch Road. Maybe picnic tables, 2 to 3 campsites along the river, maybe with tents, sleeping bags, cook stoves on loan from the rec center. Flat fields cleared and mowed, off-leash area for dogs, and improved access to the river
Mhm.
area on the southeast corner, trout fishing, etc. And so he basically, it's not development per se
Right.
with buildings or anything.
Right.
He did say that he would like to exclude money generating things
Like
like
go-kart tracks,
go-kart
golf
tracks,
driving
golf
ranges,
ranges. Yeah,
skeet shooting, I think he means, zip
Yep.
wires, et cetera, et cetera.
so the idea was not a true development, but a use of the property the way
Leave it like
that
a,
it is.
it is
And
now a
some
park-like area
Mhm.
with some cleanup,
With some
potentially
cleanup.
putting some picnic tables or.
Yeah.
I guess what he means by improve access to swimming area is like to clean up that area where the fire pit is a little bit and.
Yeah, down
you
by
know,
the river,
make that trail,
Yep,
that
at
little
the-
walking trail
like he said.
in the southeast corner, maybe open
southeast
that up a
corner.
little bit so
Mhm.
people can walk, sit along the river
Yeah.
and swim in that area if they choose.
We have to be careful. The river is a shoreland protected water body, so 250 feet of land from the normal high water mark of the river is limited by state law in what can be done there. So the types of things that he would be requesting would have to fall within the Shoreline Protection Act rules. So.
The only one that I see, I would object to is the campsites.
Yeah,
I don't think we want people.
And again, they're right.
I don't think we want people
Right.
camping down there, but,
right.
you know, cleaning up the beach, having a dog area, which is already there really.
Having some mowed
A few
areas where
picnic
it's open
tables down by
already. Mhm.
the beach.
And I have discussed with David a
Mhm.
couple of times, the cleanup of the area.
It's that
along
wetlands area,
West Branch.
right,
It
right
is
by the
wetlands.
bridge that goes down. that would
And
look
so
down there.
we would have to follow whatever the rules that DES
That,
regulations.
that's a little bit more
Yeah, that would be,
involved.
that would be
I think
more
we
involved.
want it,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't disagree, I agree, but I would like to keep it much more general than agreeing to 3 picnic tables. Things
Yeah,
along
and-
that line.
Yeah, and the
If we come up-
request that he had
if we come
was
up
to
with a-
have this as deed restrictions.
Yes,
I would definitely seek legal counsel for how we could word it. The
Well-
purchase and sale agreement or the deed itself.
right,
But if we put a
but-
conservation easement on it. wouldn't
We had
that
talked
solve
about
a lot
that.
of the
that's right, that's
issues?
right,
And that, because that goes with the land.
right, and a good chunk of that, I think we would,
Mhm.
put under conservation.
And there are ways to do that through the Conservation Commission that
Right,
are already in statute.
right, and
we
you
can
can't
do
have a
as-
picnic table in a
Absolutely.
conservation area,
I
it's
mean,
not.
rather than
being
say
disturbed.
3 picnic tables, you could just say a picnic area.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm looking for
Yeah,
more
yeah.
general.
Keep it
Yeah.
more general.
More general
More
language to develop
okay.
this as a
Mhm.
a non-profit making area. I don't know, I'm coming up with the language, that
Right.
use in typical park environments such as hiking trails, a small picnic area, maybe a dog, a dog park.
Or an
As
off-leash-
examples.
or an
Off-leash area.
Off-leash area,
Yeah.
excuse me, yes, we don't want to go back to that
Don't go to
ordinance.
dump.
No.
Off-leash dog area.
Yeah, but we can use those as examples of what we think about. I mean, I think that's how we've done it in the past, right? Without saying it will be these things.
Yeah.
But that takes it out of, I think, a deed
Keep
restriction.
it general.
Keep
Yeah.
it general.
I will stress that with council.
Yeah, and David, because the
Mhm.
purpose of the meeting is to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
back to David,
right,
right? We're waiting
yes.
on legal on one side, but the purpose of the meeting is to get back to David on his.
And
Conditions.
from what I remember, with our conversation with him previously, he did not have an issue with the conservation easement.
No, I don't
correct?
think he did either.
No,
No.
You've yet to use the word car parking. Where you're gonna, you're creating this situation trying to pull people in, where are they gonna park their car?
One of the things that we thought about when we were considering purchasing the land was to use the area immediately as you turn onto the property off of West Branch, is to put a little 5 or 6 car park area, with crushed stone, not paved. Maybe as well, an information board. That is a very nice area for trail access, right? So in the winter, you can park there and get right on the connector that takes you up Greeley Path, that takes you up to Livermore Road, or in the summer, you can walk, Mike's, or you can ski, Mike's Stream, what have you. So I think we do want to have that. My own preference is, we'll have to see. My own preference is that we do consider constructing a small area for parking so people can get there.
Right now, you can just drive in and park in the.
He doesn't
Yeah.
stop
the
anyone
dog
from
park
parking.
area.
He
right,
doesn't stop anyone from driving onto his property and
I park
parking.
there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that would be, that's a good point. We should not, to my way of thinking, we should not forget that. I think a small parking, a little informational sign, a trail map, that sort of thing would be very nice in that corner of the town. So I think we're in general agreement
I think so.
that we're okay with the sense of his
okay.
hopes / conditions,
Mhm.
but we want to write it in a way that's
Yep.
more general, but that will accomplish what he's trying to accomplish, and that's why you
Yep.
have lawyers.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Okay,
So if we can get that back to him, and then also as we go through our legal
to
process,
council,
we can work
Okay.
with counsel.
we will work
Okay.
on that.
Any other questions from the board,
Nope.
right?
I mean,
Anybody want to?
My only other
comment?
thought is if it
Yep.
is becoming like a park, we could come up with a appreciating name if we do move forward,
Yeah,
Mhm.
something.
yeah, we can do all that. And again,
Yeah.
any select board, town meeting going, if we do acquire the property, we'll be able, we want to leave that option open as well.
Yeah.
To the extent it fits what conditions that we do agree to.
Right.
People forget sometimes that conditions can really tie your hands. For example, the ice arena.
Yeah.
It's in the deed, right? That
Mhm.
there must be an ice arena there.
Yeah.
And that really restricts the ability to use that land, or it's town-owned land. Just that building and the land it sits on, it really has hamstrung us over the years of doing something with that land, like selling it.
Mhm.
Okay, if nobody has any other comments, I think we've exhausted discussion this round. We'll have many more rounds, so. Thank you for expressing your opinions. I'd like to move into a short, non-public session if we can on another
For
topic.
legal,
For a legal
Issue.
issue, not related to this. So can I have a motion to go into
You all set?
non-public?
Just curiosity.
thank you.
Yeah. Do I have a motion to go into non-public?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Just let us know.
And it's going into non-public
For-
for the purpose.
for the purpose of,
discussing a legal issue.
To discuss a legal issue. Yes, I guess we gotta be more, especially on.
I don't think, that.
And can you close the door too, Sharon, when you're done with that? No.